Welcome to Satsunami. Hello everybody and welcome to the 3-year anniversary of Satsunami. My name's Satsunami and joining me today is none other than the bardic inspiration himself. He is the one and only person who helped me start this podcast. It is Craigy C. Craigy C, welcome back.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here for what is now the 4th time talking about Dungeons & Dragons related stuff, starting celebrating the 3-year anniversary. It's an absolute thrill to be here.
Yeah, see, a couple of years ago when we started this podcast, did you think we were going to make it to the 3-year mark?
I'm going to be real with you, man. I only see like weeks at a time in my timeline. I'm really bad at imagining things, so I didn't think you were ever going to stop, but I didn't know it would ever last this long. But mate, I guess probably your perspective is more interesting because it's your show. What did you think was going to happen?
Honestly, I have no idea, because by the time this episode is out, the Chats and Shorts episode will be out for this, where I talk about my experience over the years, what I've learned about podcasting. Honestly, after the first episode, I was like, you know that Napoleon meme that's going around where he's just sitting there and he's like, there's nothing we can do? That was like me after the first episode. What now? After episode 1, I was like, what am I going to do? Because obviously you were doing your podcast at the time and you had other things to do, so you can come on every week and there was other friends who can come on, so I was just like, how do I keep it going? And then of course, as well, though, fortunately Adam had stepped in to co-host and now Andrew's here. You keep coming back as well in the best way possible, at least up until the Minions episode. Surprisingly, I still can't believe that's the very first episode that you and I did in person.
It really didn't get topped after that. We never did another one in person because we didn't need to.
I know, with 1,000 plays and
millions of plays.
Gold plated by Spotify, if they do that. I don't do Spotify do something like that. I don't know. Be sure. Let's pretend. They've just got a gold minion just with our signatures on it.
We gave it to them, actually. We sent them the gold minion with the signatures on it to say, good luck for hosting this episode.
I'm going to be honest, see, when you called me at 3 a.m. asking for a couple £100 for like a solid gold minion, I was like, surely they're scamming you at those prices. That leads us on to today's sponsor, this episode. Oh, for legal reasons, that's a joke. We are not sponsored by Illumination or any affiliates who want to make, I don't know, what would you call it, effigies of minions out of gold. The golden god of minions. But yeah, it is hard to believe that it has been 3 whole years, and we've gone through so many topics, haven't we?
It's nice though, because we're coming back to something around Dungeons & Dragons, which is kind of like the anniversary now. It's what we do every year. It's nice to kind of look back and reflect on it, because there's been so many things, so many like themed months, so many different topics. You've got the Patreon now, you've done Twitch streaming, there's a whole host of things to look back on.
As you said, Dungeons & Dragons was the topic that kicked this all off. And as I said, when I was writing that other episode for Chats and Shorts, I was basically talking about how I had a bit of an identity crisis with the podcast, because as I said, we did Dungeons & Dragons, and then I was like, right, what now? Because I don't have nearly the knowledge to do a Dungeons & Dragons podcast, just solely talking about it. I wasn't sure whether it was going to be a gaming podcast, a film and TV podcast, so I did what I do best. I became indecisive and just chose everything.
They don't tell you that in podcasting school, but yeah, you don't need to pick one topic. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's surprising the amount of people that do try to, and don't get me wrong, obviously if you're very passionate about one topic, then by all means go for it. Don't feel as if you don't have to go for one topic. But yeah, the amount of podcasters who are like, oh, you have to stick to one topic to be successful, you have to do this, you have to do that, and they are through the roof popular. You don't have to really have them advertising themselves. They've got their fans doing it for them, kind of thing. And they talk about everything without naming any names for certain ones, but you know, they don't really need to hone in on one thing. So yeah, no, I wouldn't agree with people having to focus on one thing, which is ironic considering the one thing we're going to focus on for the 3rd time is
the 4th time.
What was the 3rd time?
1st year anniversary, 2nd year anniversary, 3rd year anniversary in the 1st episode.
Did we do it for the 2nd year anniversary?
I feel like we did.
Oh no, we definitely mentioned it. There's no way. It's like, you know, that meme of try not to mention Dungeons and Dragons.
Sweat pouring off him.
Yeah. But yeah, of course, today, because of this glorious anniversary for living as long with the podcast, today we are indeed going to be talking about a film that, before we actually came on, I was actually surprised it came out this year. And that, of course, is Dungeons and Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves. Honestly, I was actually really shocked by this film. Before we get into this film in depth, I remember seeing it advertised, and let's face it, this particular genre kind of shares itself with the reputation of things like video game films, early superhero films,
The first D&D film.
the first D&D film. But you know that way it's like there's so many bad adaptations beforehand that you can't believe there's going to be a good one on the horizon.
Yeah, and I think especially when it comes to something like Dungeons and Dragons, where it's like tonally so weird, I think Dungeons and Dragons is a really difficult thing to nail down because the concept of Dungeons and Dragons is pretty serious. But anyone that's played D&D or watched anything to do with D&D knows it is the opposite. No matter how serious you try to make a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, it's going to go off the rails in some way. So I think that's where the first D&D movie kind of went. It was fine for a movie, but it never really captured the spirit of Dungeons and Dragons. I think that's a really difficult thing to do. I was thinking of this when we lead up to this, but I think this film could only have been made post Marvel movies because they needed that stupidity, the same like the Guardians of the Galaxy tone that only really been done post Marvels. Yeah, shocking is a good way to describe it because I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, because see, when this was getting advertised, is it right to say that a lot of people were feeling quite apprehensive about it?
Yeah, the trailers definitely weren't funny, particularly. I think they had a couple of jokes in them, but they weren't hilariously funny. So I think people were unsure of what line it would ride. Would it be stupid or would it be serious? You know, I think people didn't really know what it was going to be. I think anything where it's got such a big fandom, there's always going to be apprehension for any kind of movie adaptation.
And as you said, it is weird looking back on, see, the first adaptation where they took a very serious approach. I don't know enough about the lore. I'm going to be honest here, and this is me putting my cards on the table, but I do not know enough about the D&D lore to say, oh, this is so-and-so from that place or this place. This is probably going to get my D&D card revoked here, but I know the basics of it. I know what a beholder is. I know the class systems. I know more or less the surface level stuff. Owlbears and mimics and things like that. I know about those. But when I was looking up this film again, there's a lot of really cool Easter eggs and things for locations and such. And I'm going to be honest, and this is your fault, so apologies, but I've only played homebrew campaigns.
I want to just interrupt you. I'll say you were like, I'm going to revoke my own D&D card here. Actually, it was Craig's fault. Oh, man.
Well, I mean, it's both our faults. It was a different time, okay? None of us knew any better. Goodwill Hunting moment there. It's not your fault, Chris. It's not your fault. Yeah, and that's not a bad thing. As I spoke about in length, you know, in the past episode, so please feel free to check those out. But as I said, there's no wrong way to play D&D. If you want to play it as a min-max session or whatever, if you want to play more gameplay-oriented, feel free. If you want to roleplay more, feel free. But for us, it was a lot more homebrew, and I think for us that gave it a very emotional connection. You know, it wasn't just X location from the books, it was Greentop Island or all of these places, and it was just quite special in that way. So I have to say, when they had really in-depth moments, I have to admit I wasn't as clued up, but were you the same?
I'm a little more clued up, but not massively. So one of my first passes into D&D was Acquisitions Incorporated, a series, and they use the actual official D&D lore and settings, and basically typically the way their games would work is they were like an official Dungeons & Dragons podcast, so Dungeons & Dragons would release a module and they would play a bit of that. So that was kind of where I knew most of the lore from. So like city names, I didn't like know the stories, but like the locations and the various things like that was kind of more what I knew. So that was like the Easter eggs levels that I went to, but things like characters and stuff I'm not that clued up on.
If you were a Dungeons and Dragons fan and you heard name drops like, is it Jonathan? And things like that, if you heard those, you'd be like, oh, I get that. But I think for me, because I went in completely blind, or not completely, but relatively blind, at least I could enjoy the twists and turns. You know, you could kind of expect bits and pieces, but I have to say it was a lot more enjoyable in that way, where I was like, oh my god, it's that location, or how are they going to get to this location? Honestly, I'm a bit disappointed there wasn't more shatter spells, to be quite frank. I was severely disappointed they didn't just crash the wall and then just walk through.
Yeah, I mean, what's quite cool though is like you mentioned Easter eggs and stuff. Every spell that's used in that movie is a Dungeons and Dragons spell. Like like it's something that Wizards of the Sorcerers and Studios can use, which is really cool. You didn't need to know everything, which is quite a nice balance, but like if things helped, you know what I mean? I think that was really cool. Something I think's missing quite a lot, because I'm gonna be real, I've stopped watching Star Wars because I get to that stage where I'm like, am I supposed to know everything here? I get myself confused about what I do and don't know, what I'm supposed to know watching everything. So now I'm like, nah, I can't watch Star Wars anymore. There's too much going on. Every character's someone else. Something like this where it's just like, oh, there's a wee nod. Like, that's fine, and that's a good level for me, I think.
No, I totally agree with you on that point. It is definitely a chore watching. I think it's more a Disney thing, mind you, but it's not isolated to them. If you've got your MCUs, you've got your Star Wars, where they have to have like a bigger universe to bring in together. But with D&D, and especially with this film, there is so much lore, but I have to say they do explain it in quite a good, well-paced manner. I never really felt bored throughout the film. Do you remember the first film where they had like this huge exposition scene in this council chamber or something? I don't remember, word for word. I just remember nearly falling asleep, and it was like Jeremy Irons and whoever the Queen Princess, whoever the other person was.
Queen Princess.
Queen Princess, my mortal enemy. No, that's not a class in D&D before anybody asks. But they are arguing about this or that, and they're having the time of their lives with their acting. And yeah, I was like, oh, this is absolutely terrible the way they do it. But I love how, I mean this in the most complimentary way possible, the fact this starts at a prison. You've got your characters locked up, you get their backstory. See, if they started at a tavern, I feel as if that would be the more stereotypical manner to start off. But I thought that was perfect, the way they started it and the way that they explained the backstory of the characters.
Yeah, and I think even the backstories are great because it's like just enough trope. You know what you're getting, but they've all got like little twists and turns in their characters as well, which I really like.
And I mean, as I said, the Jonathan twist, I did not see that coming. I was absolutely in hysterics because I didn't realise this was a character, but I kept thinking, oh, Jonathan, he must know him and everything. That's why they're making such a big deal. And then when this big eagle-looking guy came in, I was like, oh, I get it now.
The joke is, well, they were going to release him, and then they had this madcap escape. Like, as a dungeon master, that's such a D&D player thing to do. I think this is the thing they absolutely nailed, was the tone. The amount of times where, as a dungeon master, that you're watching this game and you're like, no, this is exactly what my idiot players would do. And the bit where they've concocted this scheme to escape the prison, they just get released anyway, but it's like, no, we're following through on the scheme. It's such a D&D game thing. There's not a D&D group I've been with that wouldn't do that same stupid mistake.
Yeah, I have to admit, I was watching that, and as someone who's only played a bard extensively through D&D, I was like, that is 100% what I would do. That would honestly be the moment I would put my hand up and say, Craig, can I speak to you for a second? So you're telling me he's got wings, right? Yeah. Okay.
Write it down.
No, I would 100% do that. But yeah, I completely agree with you. I love the absolute mix of things in this film, especially in terms of the plot points and the tones, because you've got your serious moments, you've got your comedic relief, you've got your drama, your emotional beats, as we said. You've got all of these things coming together, and I feel as if they somehow blend perfectly. And going back to what we were talking about in our episode on our D&D experience, it was amazing how, at least for us, we had some characters who went through really big character arcs in serious moments, but there was other times where someone would attempt to go through a serious moment, but then other people would well, like myself and Adam, of course, we would decide we were going to start an interior decorating business, we were going to blow up peasants by accident because we thought we had the right parcel. Long story, listen to my episode on Blumro the Bard. Yeah, it was amazing to see that, because you had the bard who was, oh, look, I'm the comic relief, but then he also had this serious side to him of trying to rescue his daughter. You had the sleazy nobleman, you had the strong, I want to say barbarian.
She was definitely barbarian.
You had the wizard who was going through an identity crisis. You had the OP druid. You had
like all the best druids.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, it's not a party until they break out the owlbear. I mean, come on. That is the thing, though. It blended so perfectly. But what did you think about that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think like that's the thing that they nailed the most, and I'll probably keep mentioning it because I just think they did such a fantastic job of it, was that tone. I would have thought it was impossible to do, to be honest, before it, because yeah, Dungeons & Dragons is is all of those things in that. It is dramatic, it is emotional, it is stupid, it is scary, it is action. And that all is Dungeons and Dragons. It is a heist movie. They did a heist in the film. They had puzzles. They nailed it. They absolutely nailed all the different tones, all the different story beats, the betrayals, the different characters. They nailed it. I genuinely would have assumed it was impossible going in. Obviously, I'm a big Dungeons and Dragons fan, and that style of comedy and that style of what they came up with is very similar to, I think, the games that we played. I think that was very similar to us, and I guess if Dungeons and Dragons isn't that to you, it might have been a bit different, but I thought they nailed it. The tone was perfect for the film, and all the emotional story beats. Everything was so reflective of the experiences that we've had.
Because going back to the first attempt, and granted there's probably loads of other attempts before the film I'm thinking of here, but that was overly serious, but then you had the moments where they tried to make it kind of comedic, but the thing was, it felt as if it was a serious story with comedic elements interjected.
It was also serious characters. The characters, I think that was one of the things they did really well in this film, was the characters. I don't want to use the word quirky because people don't like that word now, but I think it was quirky, and each characters have their own little failures and funnies and weirdness. I think that's what really builds the Dungeons and Dragons kind of thing, as opposed to a serious story with serious characters.
No, absolutely, because I'm using all my brain power here to actually think back to those characters. But that's the thing, though, it's like, you think back to them and you're like, oh yeah, you've got the stereotypical adventurer and his friend, you've got the dwarf, you've got the rogue? I can't even remember, but that actually brings me on to an interesting point. The fact that all of them are so distinctive in who they are. And I know that sounds like a weird thing to say, but I don't think enough credit's given to this, especially for visual design. As we said, you've got the barbarian character. She is very muscular. She takes no nonsense. She does her own thing and gets annoyed when she's interrupted. You've got Chris Pratt's character, of course, who is the bard, obviously because he's holding the lute, but just the way he dresses quite colourfully. You've got the wizard, you've got the druid, as I said, the nobleman. You've got all of these people that dress in a particular way, look a particular way, and it's fantastically done, because even if you're not a D&D fan, you can immediately go, right, I know what to expect from each character, and I don't think that's really applauded enough.
Yeah, it's one of those things that kind of bugs me in movies, and again, I'm going to come across dead slow in this episode, but there we go. See the amount of TV shows, movies that I watch, and then a fight scene breaks out, and I'm like, who's the good guy again? Because everyone's wearing black and everyone's wearing buckles, and you can have the best costume in the world, but when everyone else looks the same, it makes these things really difficult to follow. And the final fight of this film is super easy to follow, and there's a bit of a joke at the end of the film about an Easter egg where every attack is 6 seconds apart at the end of the film, which is a reference to how long it takes attacks to hit in D&D. But that bit where they're all fighting the final big boss mage, and every character is super distinctive, you can tell who everyone is instantly, what their powers are, what they're doing. Everyone's so unique. Yeah, they did an amazing job of just that costuming and that distinctive style that everyone has. Well, like, they all move differently, they all fight differently. They did a really fantastic job of that. And yeah, it means idiots like me can follow along.
Because I can't believe I'm bringing anime into this discussion, but that's one of the things that people make fun of, or not make fun of, but they do meme on it, where they say, oh boy, who's the protagonist? And obviously it's the multicoloured, spiky-haired person, and you think, oh...
Trying to find the JoJo villain in the crowd gimmick.
Yeah, exactly. Well, to be fair, in JoJo, they all look like protagonists. Nobody in that universe skips leg day. Come on. Yeah, that's the thing, though. It's that idea of making your heroes distinctive, and you're completely right. It makes it so much easier to follow. Because, even the best of series do that, where it's like, oh, this is the hero, and you only know that initially because that's literally what you're told. They look down the camera and they're like, this is your hero. You better follow him to the ends of the earth. But going back to the comedy, I have to admit, one of the bits that I wasn't expecting to find as funny was the graveyard scene.
Yes.
That was just absolutely hysterical.
And that's one of those ones that I think written down doesn't seem that funny. You know, like, oh, they talk to dead people and they can't figure it out. But that's the Dungeons & Dragons experience. Like, I think that's a great scene that sums it up. Was just like, the players are stupid. It's a really simple problem. They can't figure it out themselves.
To be fair, we've done that before.
Oh, 100%.
Well, sorry. I say we. I've done it as a player with you DMing and you just shaking your head in the background like, no, Satsu, why did you do this? Something that I actually find quite interesting. It's not something I really thought of when I was first watching it, but you know the scene where the two main characters, Holga and Edwin, they get captured by Hugh Grant's character, who, honestly, let's face it, it's just Hugh Grant.
Yeah, he's not acting.
Do you know the popularity of multiverses going on in media just now? I like to think he's a variant of the villain out of Paddington. Because let's face it, both spoilers, but it both ends the same way. And they both get into prison by the end.
Right. I was wondering where you were going with that, because I was like, I remember Paddington very differently.
But he just grabs one of the officers and jumps out the window.
I was like, I remember Paddington so differently.
Oh, come on. Paddington would definitely fit into this universe.
Oh, 100%. I mean, that goes... Paddington goes... Have you ever done an episode on Paddington?
I haven't, actually.
Join us back here for the 4th year anniversary.
Paddington class system. Would he be a rogue? Would he be a bard? Let's find out. I have to add that onto the list because Paddington is absolutely a fantastic film. It's a masterpiece, as Martin Scorsese would probably say.
It is.
So it's the scene where they're caught by Hugh Grant, and it's quite a funny scene, of course, where Holga asks I think it's one of the guards, like how he takes care of his axe, obviously with the intention to kill him or beat him up and steal his axe and everything, which again is another really nice touch. And she's beating him up with ease, and Chris Pratt's character, he's still tied up, he's still trying to get out, and he's like, you've got this. And someone said it's a bit like, see when you're in combat and one person has got really good rolls and they're like punching everyone, but then the other person is like still fumbling at the back and he's like, you've got this, still getting ones and twos in the back. I thought that was a good touch.
I don't really have much to add to that, but one thing in a similar note that I thought of is the scene where they're in the Underdark and the fat dragon starts trying to chase them and starts rolling. My wife pointed out quite correctly that was the DM rolling on one. So instead of it... so yeah, the players can mess up, but the Dungeon Master can also mess up, and that was a prime example of the Dungeon Master messing up. Was like, oh man, I've got this cool dragon. No, wait, I don't. He's an absolute buffoon.
I actually didn't realise that dragon was a character as well out the lore.
Yeah.
And again, this was a joy for me because I had no idea what half of these characters did. And when they turned up, I was like, oh man, that's cool. You know, a dragon spitting acid. It's like, oh yeah, I think it's black dragons can spit acid. Or, I mean, I'm just going to trust the film. I'm just going to be like, yeah, you know what, if you say that, that's fine. And then they were talking about red wizards and things, and I was just like, okay, evil wizard, because again, the visual style of this film is really iconic, I have to say, because you've got the stereotypical fantasy city that you've seen a million times, but you did want to see more of this world. You didn't just want to cut your losses and just say, I don't know about this.
Yeah, and I hope that the film did well enough that we can get sequels. That's my hope for it, because the world was fantastic. All the work they put into it, I'd love more in that universe. Well, we love D&D, but the universe was so nicely done, all the cities and stuff. I'd love to see more of it.
Here's a question for you though. Do you think this film was accessible to a general audience as opposed to just, targeting the D&D audience?
It's a hard one to say because obviously we're not the general audience. I think it was. I heard about people going that enjoyed it that didn't necessarily know D&D, but I do think it didn't do amazing numbers in the cinema, and I think a lot of that is just to do with it was trying to be a blockbuster without the right brand. From all accounts I've heard, people that went to go see it enjoyed it, but yeah, I don't think it made the money the studio were expecting because so many people just didn't go see it.
Because I have to say, without going into it too much, because I mean this could be an episode in itself, but I remember seeing the online discourse just in the run-up to it, and it seems to just be a thing about discourse over movies nowadays where you've always got someone who's just overly negative. People who are saying, oh, I didn't like the fact that Chris Pratt wasn't like the muscular hero and all of this rubbish, or oh, I didn't like this character or that character. And I have to say, there are some people out there who probably heard the negativity or, secondhand negativity, where it's like a friend of a friend said the D&D movie's bad, but you don't quite know. So, I mean, I don't know if maybe that affected it as well, but I mean, considering it came out not relatively quick, but it came out on Paramount Plus here, and I was actually really surprised it came out so soon on streaming services. Like, not overly soon, but
I think that's just the way a lot of things are now, though, with post-COVID. I think they've rushed a lot of the films, especially the ones that were made in that era, to streaming. We'll see what happens in the future. I think they wanted to get their money back, so they sell it quickly.
Aye, I suppose that is true, though. And it is a thing now that's starting to correct itself, because obviously during the lockdowns, during COVID, they were trying to market it to streaming services, and nowadays they're like, oh no, cinemas are back open quick. Keep keep him away, which, yeah, I gotta say, I'm not a big fan of that model, but, they're not gonna listen to this episode, let's say, so and be like, oh no, Satsu said it, reverse course. But before we wrap up, though, is there any particular moments in this film that stood out to you? Because I know we've talked about the different bits, like Jonathan and Hugh Grant as a villain, which...
The bit where we had the character that was the paladin, whose name I'm totally forgetting now, who turns up, helps him with a bunch of sessions, and then leaves by stepping over a rock in a funny way without breaking his stride.
Oh, that was hilarious.
Basically, everything in the film is almost like a meta commentary on D&D itself. And so I was laughing at the thought of that character being like the guy that's either the D&D stand-in, so the Dungeon Master stand-in, but the players just aren't getting any plot in, and you're like, we're gonna have to hurry this up, and I'll bring in an NPC to move them along. Or it was like a player who's actually good at the game coming in for a session, and then just leaving and never mentioned again, and like all that stuff. That one in particular, the fight at the end, thought that was fantastically done. We didn't even mention like the stuff in the Colosseum, but that's like a classic bit of D&D work and all the different mazes and stuff, the way they built up that. I took a lot of ideas from it, and I'm a little sad that everyone that I do play D&D with has probably watched this film now, because I would have liked to have just stole a whole bunch of it. That's kind of all my highlights. What about you?
Well, just touching on that point about people watching this film, did Wizards of the Coast not release stats for each character? Like if you wanted to play as them?
They did character sheets.
That was such a good move on their part.
Amazing.
Such a good way to get people into Dungeons and Dragons. Just wanted to point that out. I thought that was actually fantastic. Yeah, as I said, the Colosseum fight was great. I did like the wee Easter egg where you saw in the background there was like another party that were dressed as, correct me if I'm wrong, but was it the characters from the cartoon?
Yeah,
which I thought was a nice nod. I thought the action overall was just fantastic. I was really surprised. I genuinely didn't know what to think, because my girlfriend and I, we decided one gloomy day, let's just put Dungeons & Dragons on, and she's never played D&D before. So I was like, you know what, if you enjoy it, that's great. If you don't enjoy it, I'm not going to be like, oh my god.
Why didn't you enjoy it?
But I was just surprised between the action, between the comedy. I have to admit, I did get flashbacks, see at the very end, to your session, your finale, when it's like all the people banding together in this hopeless situation. I was like, oh my god.
We've been here before.
It's literally me, oh my god. But absolutely found that fantastic. As I said, all the actors, I think, did an incredible job in their roles. I don't think there's anybody that was necessarily weak. I mentioned it before, but in the old film, you got people who were either overacting or not acting enough, whereas I feel as if everybody here had that perfect balance. And even with the villains, they were evil, but that was the role they were supposed to play. They weren't comedy evil. They were still evil enough to take them seriously. But then you had the comedic relief villain, Hugh Grant's character, of course. And again, I've said it before, but him playing the charismatic villain, I feel as if he does a good job in that role. Trying to think of who else.
Bradley Cooper for 2 scenes.
Was he? Right, can I ask something here? Yeah, because one, I was really surprised at that. I was like,
is that Bradley Cooper?
Am I getting flashbacks to A Star Is Born here? Like, what is going on? Or Interstellar as well, insert your own jokes. Yeah, that was weird. Was he a gnome or was he a halfling?
I have no idea, man. I think it was a gnome. I think they made a joke. I haven't seen the film in a while, so I can't remember the exact joke.
Because he was ridiculous. And I don't know if it is just the scaling or whatever, but he was ridiculously small in that. I mean, I played a gnome bard when I first played the game, and I was looking at him and I thought, there's no way he's a gnome. Surely not. And then I did find it funny when his new partner came in and she was like a giant. I did find that funny, but I'm like, is that because she's there and, it's the big chair? Because it's not like Lord of the Rings where the hobbits are proportional. Oh, yeah, that scene messed me up a wee bit. I'm gonna lie. I'm gonna lie, I was sitting there thinking, what is the height scaling in this universe? As I said, I thought the Paladin was absolutely fantastic as well. Just the OP DMPC. I thought it was just fantastic. As I said, the finale as well was great. Honestly, there's just so much of this film, from its visuals to the choreography. I do honestly think that it deserves a sequel, but it'd be interesting to see what they did with it given more time, because for this one, this was the quintessential D&D campaign. You start off in prison, you get broken out through the most most ridiculous way possible. And then, yeah, you go in a series of shenanigal quests. Is that a word? Shenanigal quests? Yeah, why not? You end up defeating someone who's basically going to destroy the universe. So, or not universe, but, their universe. So I honestly think if you haven't seen this, and even if you're not a D&D fan, but you're on the fringes of being a fantasy fan, you would definitely love this film, 100%.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's a good time as well. It's a quick film. It's funny. Reminds me a lot of Guardians of the Galaxies. If you like that, you'll probably like this as well. Yeah, it's a good time.
A good family-friendly romp. Okay, some scenes aren't family-friendly, but, watch with caution.
That's a 12A.
Ah, yeah.
Family-friendly fun.
I mean, it's the same level as Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And by that I mean the Sam Raimi one where you get the skeletons.
Family-friendly fun.
And again, it's just a notch in the belt of Wizards of the Coast getting Dungeons & Dragons more mainstream. Because don't get me wrong, they don't need help with things like Critical Role, with more people getting into it through mainstream media. And then, of course, now they've got a film which, by all means, I think would encourage people. I mean, I think I would, if I was younger and I saw this film, I would at least be a wee bit curious about this one.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like you said, it's another notch, and that's what they're looking for. I mean, the fact that this was even able to get made, I think nowadays shows how big D&D's got, and yeah, it's only going to make it bigger.
So if you haven't seen this film, definitely go check it out, because you won't regret it. You definitely won't regret it. And I was going to make a joke about rolling the D20, but you know what? Go buy your own D20s. But saying that note, Craigy C, thank you so much for joining me on the 3rd anniversary of Satsunami, and what a journey it's been.
Yeah, what a journey. It's been a pleasure to be here once again, and I'll see you next year for our D&D Paddington campaign.
Yes. Paddington month coming soon. For legal reasons, that's a joke, by the way. But yeah, on that note, thank you all so much for not only listening to this episode, but listening to us throughout the years, and yeah, keeping with us this long. Honestly, I say it all the time, but I'm genuinely grateful to all of you out there who actually listen to the show. We put in a lot of work into it, and it's a lot of fun for us as well. Well, I'm speaking on your behalf, Craigy C, sorry.
I was going to say, I actually don't put a lot of work into this at all. It's actually mostly Sat, so I just turn up and talk crap.
You just break down my door and go, listen, minions.
We need to talk about minions, about Godzilla.
About puddlefish, yeah.
About puddlefish. You're the one that puts in the real work, I just turn up.
And I'm glad for your service, so thank you. Otherwise, this would be a very one-sided episode. But yeah, thank you all so much for supporting the show. It really means a lot to us. And if you want to check out more of our episodes, long-term listeners might know where to find us, but in case any of you are first-time listeners today, you can find us on our website, chatsunami.com, as well as all good podcast apps. Just look for the Red Panda under the name Chatsunami, and we'll see you there. I also want to give a huge shout out to our Pandalorian patrons, Robotic Battle Toaster and Sonia. Thank you so much for supporting the show. And of course, if you want to get exclusive content on Patreon, you can check us out on patreon.com/Chatsunami. But until then, stay safe, stay awesome, and most importantly, stay hydrated.
Roll for hydration. That's a 12.
That's actually not too bad. See, it's tap water, but it's room temperature, not ice cold. What did you get for your hydration roll? Leave it in the comments. Welcome to Satsunami, a variety podcast that discusses topics from gaming and films to anime and general interests.
Previously on Satsunami, we've analysed what makes a good horror game, conducted a retrospective on Pierce Brosnan's run as James Bond, and listened to us take deep dives into both the Sonic and Halo franchises.
Also, if you're an anime fan, then don't forget to check us out on our sub-series, Chatsunani, where we dive into the world of anime. So far, we've reviewed things like Death Note, Princess Mononoke, and the hit Beyblade series.
If that sounds like your cup of tea, then you can check us out on Spotify, iTunes, and all good podcast apps.
As always, stay safe,
stay awesome, and most importantly,
stay hydrated. This episode is sponsored by Zencastr. If you're a podcaster that records remotely like me, then you'll know how challenging it can be to create the podcast you've always wanted. That's where Zencastr comes in. Before I met Zencastr, I was but a naive podcaster, recording on low quality, one-track audio waves. compatible with Zencastr, you can kiss those fears goodbye as they provide crystal clear audio and HD video. Plus, with our all-in-one podcasting suite, recording with guests is extremely simple. From local recordings to post-production, Zencastr has it all. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code Satsunami. You'll get 30% off your first 3 months of Zencastr Professional. I want you to have the same easy experience I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.